Hi, I'm James. On the way to my parents' golden anniversary party, my 13-year-old daughter suddenly screamed, "Stop the car! Now!" Her face was ghost white. I slammed the brakes without a second thought because something in her voice told me this wasn't just panic. My family had been erasing me for years, from photos, from invitations, from their lives, but I never imagined their silence was hiding something far darker. What would you have done if your own child's instinct was the only thing standing between you and a trap? Before we dive in, tell me, what time are you listening to this, and where from? Drop a comment below, because this is a story you'll want to hear through to the very end. The sun was setting as I drove through the quiet streets of Albany, the trees painted in fiery shades of orange and red. Autumn had always been my favorite season. There was something grounding about it, a reminder that change was inevitable, but also beautiful. Celestine sat beside me, her small hands twisting the edge of her dress, her face pressed against the window as if she was trying to read the world outside. We were headed to my parents' golden anniversary party, an event that should have felt like a celebration, but instead, a tight knot sat in my stomach. The invitation card, still folded in the glove box, had felt like a message more than a formality. It had been addressed to my wife, not to me, not even my name on it. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe a mistake, maybe an oversight. But my parents? They never forgot details. "Mom, Dad, they notice everything," I whispered under my breath. I didn't think Celestine could hear me, but she turned slightly, her eyes narrowing in that way she had when she was piecing something together. The silence in the car was thick, broken only by the hum of the engine and the sound of passing cars. I tried to focus on the road, but my mind kept drifting back to the strained phone calls over the past month, the short, clipped responses, the way my sister had hung up on me mid-sentence 2 weeks ago. It wasn't just tension. It was as if someone had decided I no longer belonged. I opened my mouth to say something light-hearted, to break the unease, but before I could, Celestine's voice cut through the car like a blade. "Stop the car, now!" Her tone wasn't playful. It wasn't a joke. It was sharp, filled with a kind of fear I had never heard from her before. My foot slammed the brake instinctively, the tires screeching against the asphalt. My heart pounded in my chest as the car jerked to a stop, throwing us both slightly forward. "What is it? Celeste, what's wrong?" My voice cracked as I reached for her arm, trying to ground her. Her face had gone pale, her lips trembling. "Just, please, trust me." Traffic whizzed past us on both sides, horns blaring from drivers who didn't understand why I'd stopped so suddenly. But I didn't move. I just stared at her, searching her eyes for an explanation. She shook her head, clutching her seatbelt like it was the only thing keeping her anchored. I swallowed hard, adrenaline rushing through me. "Sweetheart, you've got to tell me. What did you see?" She shook her head again, tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. "Not yet. Just don't drive, please." I leaned back, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. The urge to demand an answer gnawed at me, but something in her tone, something raw and terrified, made me hold my tongue. She had never asked me for blind trust like this before. In that silence, memories flooded back uninvited, the way my parents had introduced my sister's husband at last year's Christmas dinner, praising him as if he were the son they'd always wanted. The way they avoided eye contact with me when money came up, as though I wasn't the one who had bailed them out 5 years ago. The smirk on my brother-in-law's face when he whispered, "Some people are just forgettable." And now that invitation card, missing my name, staring at me from the glove box. Erased. That's what it felt like. As if someone had reached into the family story and ripped my page out. Celestine's small hand found mine, her grip strong despite her shaking fingers. "Dad, don't look yet. Just stay still." Her words sent a chill crawling down my spine. I glanced at the side mirror anyway, unable to resist. That's when I noticed it. A car behind us, dark-tinted windows, following too closely, too deliberately. A wave of cold fear washed over me. My mouth went dry. This wasn't coincidence. Celestine's voice dropped to a whisper, almost trembling. They've been there since we left the house. I turned to her sharply, my pulse hammering in my ears. What do you mean? You noticed this before? She nodded, eyes wide. I didn't want to scare you, but when they didn't turn at the last two lights, I knew. For a moment, the world seemed to tilt. I tightened my grip on the wheel, forcing myself to breathe evenly. Whoever was in that car, they weren't just passing through. They were waiting, watching. I glanced again in the rearview mirror, my chest tightening as the dark car crept closer. A thought cut through me, bitter and sharp. This wasn't just about the invitation, was it? This was bigger. I didn't know if the danger was on that road or waiting at my parents' anniversary party. But one thing was certain. We weren't alone. The moment I glanced into the rearview mirror, my breath caught. That dark car was still there, closer now, the reflection of its headlights cutting sharp through the evening haze. For a second, I hoped maybe it was nothing, just a commuter headed in the same direction. But deep down, I knew better. Celestine's hand tightened around mine. She wasn't looking out the window anymore. She was staring straight ahead, her jaw set. "Dad," she whispered, "don't go to the party. Please." Her voice had that desperate edge that only came when a child's instinct screamed louder than reason. I tried to steady my breathing, but my pulse hammered in my ears. "Sweetheart, talk to me," I said softly, keeping my eyes on the road. "Why are you saying that?" She hesitated, her lips trembling. "Because it's not safe." The words lodged in my chest like a stone. Not safe. Not our drive, not the party, not the family gathering that should have been about love and celebration. As the miles stretched on, memories of the past few weeks flickered like snapshots I didn't want to see. The group family chat buzzing on my phone, my sister's updates about the party, my brother's jokes about the menu, but not a single reply when I tried to chime in. The way my mother ignored my suggestion about the seating plan, her silence so heavy it felt like a dismissal. And that one night, when Celestine had pulled me aside after dinner, holding a photo collage Grandma had sent early, she'd pointed at it, her small finger lingering on the glossy paper. Every smiling face was there. My parents, my siblings, their kids, even my wife. But not me. Not one photo. I'd laughed it off then, said, "Guess they ran out of space." But the truth, it gutted me. For the first time, I remembered thinking, I feel like a guest at my own parents' table. The car behind us edged closer. My grip on the steering wheel tightened. Celestine broke the silence. "Dad, Mom told me not to tell you." Her eyes brimmed with a mix of fear and resolve, but I overheard something. They said there was a plan for tonight, something bad. The air seemed to vanish from the car. "What do you mean?" My voice was low, sharp. "I don't know everything," she whispered. I was in the hallway when Mom was on the phone with Aunt Marlene. She said, "Just make sure he's there. Everything depends on him being in the car." The knot in my stomach twisted tighter. Betrayal burned hotter than fear. My wife, my partner, had told our daughter to keep this from me. I forced myself to breathe evenly, to think. "Okay," I said slowly. "We're not going to the party yet." I pulled off at the next rest stop, the tires crunching over gravel as I steered into a parking spot under a flickering light. The dark car eased past us on the highway, not slowing down, but I couldn't shake the sense it would be back. I reached for my phone, dialing my wife. The ringback tone felt like it lasted hours. No answer. I tried again, straight to voicemail. Celestine sat stiffly beside me, watching every move I made. "She won't pick up," she said quietly. "She doesn't want you to know." My throat tightened. I wanted to deny it, to believe this was all some awful misunderstanding. But then Celestine's phone buzzed in her lap. She glanced at the screen, and her face drained of color. "What is it?" I asked, my chest tightening. She turned the screen toward me. A text from an unknown number. "Make sure he's in the car when you arrive." The glow of those words burned into me, louder than any horn on the highway, clearer than any whispered doubt. This wasn't paranoia. This was a trap. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the glowing message on Celestine's phone. The words blurred, my pulse drumming in my ears, the silence inside the car stretching too long. Celestine sat beside me, her small hands clutching the phone like it was proof of something neither of us wanted to admit. "Dad," she whispered, her voice breaking the spell. "We can't go. Please, don't make me get back on that road." I swallowed hard, forcing myself to breathe. This wasn't some misunderstanding. It wasn't me being paranoid or reading too much into my family's silence these last few weeks. Someone wanted me exactly where I wasn't supposed to be, inside that party. I read the message again, slower this time. "Make sure he's in the car when you arrive." It wasn't random. It wasn't chance. It was deliberate. The fluorescent light above the rest stop flickered, buzzing faintly, and I felt as if even the shadows were listening. I reached over and took Celestine's trembling hand in mine. "You're right. We're not going to the party." She let out a breath she'd been holding and leaned into me, whispering, "I knew you'd listen." For a moment I just held her, my mind racing back through the signs I'd ignored. Last Christmas, when we all gathered at my parents' house, I'd noticed the family gift exchange list pinned to the fridge, names carefully written out in my mother's neat handwriting. My siblings, their spouses, even distant cousins, but not me. When I asked about it, Dad chuckled and said, "Oh, you don't mind, do you? You're hard to shop for anyway." Everyone laughed, and I pretended to laugh too, but it sat like a stone in my stomach. Later that night, during the toast, Dad raised his glass high. "To my wonderful children, who've given us so much joy." His eyes passed over each of my siblings. Not once did they land on me. I raised my glass anyway, smiling like it didn't matter. But I remember thinking, maybe I don't belong here anymore. The flickering light above brought me back to the present. Celestine was watching me, waiting. I squeezed her hand. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to my sister Elaine's number, and hit call. She answered on the third ring, her voice clipped. "Hello?" "Elaine, it's me," I said quietly. "What's going on tonight?" There was a pause. Too long. Then a nervous laugh. You're on your way, right?" "I asked you a question," I pressed, my tone sharper than I intended. She exhaled shakily. "They said you wouldn't ask questions." My grip on the phone tightened. "They? Who's they, Elaine?" The line crackled, then went dead. She'd hung up. The sound of the disconnect hit me harder than I expected. It confirmed what my gut had been screaming. This wasn't just my imagination. My family was in on something. I closed my eyes for a moment, steadying myself. Betrayal stung worse than fear. Celestine's voice was small, but steady. "She knows, doesn't she?" "Yes," I said softly. "She knows." We sat there in the quiet, the hum of passing cars in the distance. I wanted to drive away, take her somewhere safe, anywhere but back toward that party. "Dad?" she asked gently. "Yes, sweetheart?" "What if they won't let us leave?" The question cut straight through me. Before I could answer, the sound of tires on gravel made me turn my head. A pair of headlights swung into the lot, blinding against the dark. The same car that had been shadowing us. It pulled in slow, deliberate, the beams locking onto ours like a predator finally spotting its prey. The same dark car that had been shadowing us rolled into the lot, its headlights locking onto ours like a predator eyeing prey. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to stay calm for Celestine. I lowered my voice. "Don't look at them. Just sit still." She nodded, her small hand clutching mine with a grip stronger than I thought she had. We sat there in silence, the buzzing fluorescent lights above us casting a sickly glow over the nearly empty lot. The car parked a few spaces away, its engine idling. 2 figures inside. They didn't get out. They didn't need to. Their presence was enough. I tried to steady my breathing, but every beat of my heart felt like it echoed inside that car. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. Maybe it was nothing, but deep down I knew better. "Dad," Celestine whispered, so softly I almost missed it. "There's something I didn't tell you." I turned to her. "What is it?" She looked down, tears shimmering in her eyes. "I heard Mom on the phone a few days ago. She didn't know I was in the hallway." I felt my body stiffen. "What did she say?" Her voice shook. "She said, just make sure he's in the car and everything will be taken care of." It was like the ground shifted under me. I had suspected, yes, but hearing it from my daughter's lips made it real. I tried to keep my expression calm for Celestine, but inside, fury burned hot. My wife, her mother, wasn't just ignoring me or leaving me out. She was involved in whatever trap this was. I closed my eyes briefly, and the memory of last week surfaced. She had insisted we go to the anniversary party. When I suggested we drive separately so I could stop by a client's office first, she snapped, "No, we'll go together. It's important." I'd chalked it up to nerves. Now it felt like a command. Even the way she hovered when I tried to check the invitation had been strange. She'd snatched it back with a quick smile. "Don't worry. I've got it all handled." All handled. My name missing from the card hadn't been an oversight. It had been deliberate. I opened my eyes, meeting Celestine's fearful gaze. "We're leaving," I said firmly. I started the car, backing slowly out of the space, careful not to draw attention. The dark car remained still, but I could feel eyes on us. I turned onto the road, taking a different route, away from the highway, away from the party. For a few minutes, the tension in the car eased, the sound of the tires on the asphalt steady and reassuring. But then, my phone rang. The sound made me flinch. The screen lit up. Her name. My hand hovered over the answer button. Celestine looked at me, pleading silently not to pick up. I swallowed and pressed accept. Her voice came through, cold and steady. "Where are you?" "They're waiting." I froze, every muscle in my body tight. Her tone wasn't curious. It wasn't loving. It was expectant, almost rehearsed. I couldn't speak. My throat closed. The image of her smiling at me over breakfast that morning flashed in my mind, and now it felt like a lie carved into my memory. "Hello?" she pressed, sharper now. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." I ended the call without a word, my hand trembling so hard the phone nearly slipped from my grasp. Celestine's voice was barely audible. "Dad?" I forced a smile I didn't feel. "It's going to be okay, but we can't trust anyone now." As I slipped the phone back into my pocket, I realized the truth hit harder than the headlights behind us. I wasn't just fighting strangers. I was fighting my own blood. I ended the call with trembling fingers, realizing I wasn't just fighting strangers. I was fighting my own blood. The highway stretched out behind us like a dark ribbon, the glow of the rest stopped fading in the rear view. My hands were stiff on the steering wheel, the silence inside the car heavy except for Celestine's shallow breathing beside me. She hadn't let go of my hand since the call. By the time we found a small roadside motel, night had fully fallen. The neon vacancy sign buzzed faintly, its red letters flickering against the cold air. I pulled in, my heart pounding as though the car itself might betray us if I lingered too long. Inside the office, a tired-looking clerk slid a registration card across the counter. I signed a false name without hesitation. I'd never lied like that before, but it felt necessary, like one more step in a game I hadn't chosen but was forced to play. Celestine stayed close, her eyes darting toward the parking lot as though she expected the dark car to roll in behind us. When we finally shut the door to the motel room, I leaned against it, locking it twice. The place smelled faintly of bleach and old carpet. The hum of the heater filled the silence. For a moment, the ordinary feel of it, the stiff bedspreads, the dim lamp by the nightstand, made it seem almost safe. Almost. Celestine climbed onto the bed, curling her legs beneath her. "Dad, are we going to be okay?" I tried to smile, but the weight in my chest kept it from reaching my eyes. "We will. I promise." As she turned her gaze to the muted TV, I sat on the edge of the other bed and let the exhaustion wash over me. My mind drifted back through the years. All the times I'd told myself their coldness didn't matter, the subtle ways I'd been erased. At last Christmas, my father raised his glass during the family toast. He thanked everyone by name, my siblings, their spouses, even distant cousins. My name never left his lips. I'd laughed it off then, saying, "Guess I'm invisible tonight." The silence that followed had been sharper than any insult. And now, the invitation card. My name, absent. A symbol I'd ignored until it was too late. "Maybe I've been blind all along," I said quietly, more to myself than to her. Celestine's head turned quickly. "No, Dad, you're not blind. They just didn't want you to see." The words cut deeper than I expected. I rubbed a hand over my face, wondering if walking away from all of it might be the only way to survive. Maybe if we disappeared, they couldn't touch us. Maybe silence was safer. But before I could say it out loud, Celestine shifted. She pulled out her phone, hesitated, then pressed play on a voice memo. Her mother's voice filled the room, sharp and unmistakable. "Once he's across the border, it'll be too late." Another voice joined, my brother-in-law's. "We just have to make sure he gets there." My blood ran cold. I looked at Celestine. "I didn't mean to overhear," she whispered, tears brimming. "But I couldn't ignore it. I thought, maybe if you heard it too, you'd believe me." I stared at the phone, my stomach twisting. The conspiracy was bigger than I'd feared. Not just her mother. Family I'd once trusted. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. "Celestine," I whispered. "They planned this for weeks." She grabbed my hand, her eyes fierce despite her trembling lips. "If you give up now, they win, and we'll never be safe." Her words sank deep, breaking through the fog of despair. She was 13. She shouldn't have had to carry this weight. But here she was, braver than I felt. I sat there, staring at the cracked ceiling, the heater rattling softly. Silence would be easy, running would be easy, but she was right. If I stayed quiet, I'd be complicit in my own erasure. I squeezed her hand back, finally steady. "You're right. We're not running anymore." Her shoulders relaxed, and for the first time that night I saw hope flicker in her eyes. As I held the phone with Celestine's recording playing in my hand, I realized we had more power than they thought, and that terrified them. The first light of dawn seeped through the thin motel curtains, gray and uncertain. I hadn't slept much, my mind circling the same thought. If they were willing to orchestrate something this cold, then running would never be enough. Celestine stirred beside me, her hair tousled, her eyes heavy with the kind of fatigue no child should ever know. She whispered, "Dad, what do we do now?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "We don't run anymore," I told her softly. "We outsmart them." Her brows knit in confusion. "But how?" I tapped the phone in my hand. "This recording, this is our leverage. They think they're in control, but they don't know we have proof." We packed quietly, moving with purpose. I checked us out under the same false name I'd used the night before, scanning the parking lot before stepping outside. No sign of the dark car. Still, my pulse raced with every shadow. Back on the road, the air felt heavy, as if the whole world was holding its breath. I reached for the phone and dialed my wife. My voice was calm, practiced, as though nothing had changed. "We're on our way," I said. Her tone was honeyed, but beneath it I heard something brittle. "Good. Everyone's waiting. Is Celestine with you?" That single question froze me. She hadn't asked how I was. She hadn't asked if we were safe. Only that. I glanced at Celestine, who clutched my hand tight. "Yes," I answered, letting the word hang in the air. There was the faintest pause on the other end. Then, quickly, "Good. Just make sure you're not late." She hung up before I could say more. I exhaled slowly, my grip tightening on the wheel. I looked at Celestine. "They want you there too. This isn't just about me." Her face paled. "So they were lying all along." "They were," I said, my jaw tightening. "But we're going to change the rules." Instead of heading to my parents' house, I pulled into a familiar diner on the outskirts of Albany. The neon sign flickered faintly against the morning gray. I parked close to the entrance, making sure we were in clear view of the busy street. Safety, I told myself, lay in public eyes. We slid into a booth by the window. Celestine kept her phone on the table, the recording queued up. I wrapped my hands around a mug of black coffee, trying to mask the shaking in my fingers. Not long after, the bell above the door jingled. My wife walked in, my brother-in-law at her side. Both wore rehearsed smiles, the kind you'd expect at a family brunch, not at the scene of a betrayal. "Surprise," she said lightly, sliding into the booth across from us. "We didn't think you'd be here so early." I kept my expression neutral. "Plans change." Her brother shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting to the phone on the table. I leaned forward slightly, lowering my voice so only they could hear. "I know about the border," I said evenly. "I know about the bag. And I know you were ready to sacrifice me." The words landed like stones dropped into a still pond. Their smiles froze, then began to falter. My wife's lips parted as if to deny it, but no sound came. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The calm in my tone was sharper than any shout. Celestine reached for my hand under the table, her grip firm, her eyes steady on them. For the first time, I saw cracks in their performance. The practiced charm slipped, replaced by something rawer, fear. The fake smiles vanished, and for the first time, I saw the fear in their eyes. I leaned back in the booth, letting the silence stretch while the hum of the diner filled the space between us. Celestine's small hand was still tucked in mine, steadying me more than I wanted to admit. My wife's face had drained of color, her brother's jaw twitching like he was ready to pounce. Without a word, I slipped my phone from my pocket and tapped the screen under the table. A soft click, and Celestine's recording spilled quietly between us. Her mother's voice, unmistakable, came through. "Just make sure he's in the car, and everything will be taken care of." The blood drained from my wife's face entirely. She shot forward, hissing, "Turn that off right now!" Her brother's hand darted toward the phone, but I snapped, calm and cold, "Touch it, and I'll play this out loud for the entire diner to hear." He froze, his hand hovering over the Formica table before retreating. The waitress, refilling a nearby booth, glanced our way, curiosity sparking in her eyes. I could almost feel her ears tuning to the tension. "You've always been paranoid," my wife spat, forcing her voice low but sharp. "Twisting things, imagining conspiracies. You're sick, and now you're dragging Celestine into your delusions." I held her gaze, my voice steady. "Paranoid? Then explain why you told them to make sure I was in the car. Explain why you lied to me for weeks." Her brother leaned forward, his voice full of venom. "You'll regret crossing us. You think anyone's going to believe you? You've been unstable for years. People will see this for what it is, an emotional breakdown." Celestine tightened her grip on me. She looked straight at them, her young voice cutting through the air. "Stop lying. I heard you. I know what you're trying to do." Her words made them flinch. For the first time, I saw cracks in their confidence. The waitress walked by again, this time pausing. She set down the coffee pot and leaned slightly closer as she poured. Her lips barely moved as she whispered, "My cousin works with the DA's office. If you need help, take this." She slipped a small card onto the edge of our table, her eyes full of something I hadn't seen in a long time. Trust. I slid the card into my pocket without hesitation. My wife's eyes darted to the waitress, then back at me, fury burning now. "You're destroying this family," she hissed. "Do you have any idea what you're doing?" I stood slowly, pulling Celestine up beside me. "No," I said evenly. "You destroyed it the moment you decided betrayal was easier than honesty." Their expressions faltered. My wife opened her mouth again, but I didn't wait to hear the excuse. I dropped a 20 on the table for the untouched coffee and led Celestine toward the door. As we stepped into the cool air outside, I could still hear her voice behind us, shrill and desperate. "You're going to regret this!" Celestine looked up at me, her voice trembling but firm. "Dad, are we going to the courthouse?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "If they want to play games, then we'll play by rules they don't control." The walk back to the car felt longer than it was, every step carrying the weight of years I'd ignored the signs. As we drove toward Albany's courthouse district, the card the waitress had slipped me pressed against my thigh like a reminder. We weren't as powerless as they thought. Celestine sat close, her eyes fixed ahead, her jaw set in determination that reminded me so much of her grandmother, it ached. I gripped the wheel tighter. The fear was still there, but it had changed. No longer the kind that froze me. It sharpened me. As we pulled onto the busy street leading to the courthouse, I knew this was it. The truth was out there now, too loud to silence. As we walked toward the courthouse, I knew the next move would decide everything. Celestine's hand was firm in mine, her step steady, though I could feel the tremor of her nerves through her grip. The courthouse steps were crowded, reporters swarming the entrance for a hearing that had nothing to do with us, yet their cameras turned as soon as voices began to rise. My wife and her brother weren't far behind. They didn't wait for privacy. Instead, they wanted an audience. My wife's voice cut through the air like a knife. "He's unstable," she shouted, pointing directly at me. "He's dragging our daughter through his paranoia. Someone stop him before he hurts her." A few passers-by slowed, murmuring, their eyes darting between us. My chest tightened, not with doubt but with the fear of how quickly public opinion could turn. Her brother stepped forward, holding a manila folder high. "This," he declared, shaking it for emphasis, "is proof. He's drowning in debt. He's unfit to take care of Celestine. He's gambling away their future." My wife clutched her pearls like some grieving widow. "He doesn't care about her well-being. He's risking her life." For a second, I felt the weight pressing down, the same weight I'd carried for years, the doubt they'd planted in everyone's mind, the careful image they'd painted of me as the weak link, the problem. A few in the crowd shook their heads at me. One woman whispered to another, "That poor child." But Celestine tugged at my sleeve, her wide eyes urging me not to falter. I drew a breath, letting the anger settle into something sharper, steadier. Without a word, I tapped the phone in my pocket, slid the volume up, and pressed play. The sound came clear and undeniable. My wife's voice, captured days earlier. "Just make sure he's in the car, and everything will be taken care of." Then my brother-in-law's reply, low but distinct. "Once he's across the border, it'll be too late. He won't come back." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Reporters swiveled, cameras zooming in. My wife's face twisted in horror. Her brother lunged, but I stepped back, holding the phone aloft. "Touch it," I said calmly, "and I'll make sure this plays on every news station in Albany by tonight." Her brother froze mid-stride, his face pale under the midday sun. My wife shrieked, "It's fake! Lies! He doctored that! He's obsessed!" But it was too late. A uniformed court officer who had been standing nearby pushed through the crowd. "Sir, ma'am," he said sternly, "I'll need you both to come with me for questioning." Panic lit their faces. My brother-in-law sputtered, "You can't do this. He's the one who—" "Save it for the DA," the officer interrupted. He motioned to a second officer who guided them firmly down the steps. My wife's voice rose above the din, frantic now. "You're destroying this family. You'll regret this." I didn't answer her. Instead, I turned to Celestine, who was standing tall beside me despite her trembling hands. I crouched slightly, looking her in the eyes. "You were right to trust your instincts," I whispered. Her lips trembled into the smallest smile. "I knew you'd believe me," she said softly. Behind us, reporters barked questions, cameras flashed, voices tangled in a storm of curiosity and judgment. But for once, I didn't feel the need to defend myself. The truth had spoken louder than their lies ever could. As the officers led them away, I finally felt the silence I'd been craving, one that belonged to peace, not fear. That silence stayed with me for days afterward, echoing through the house every evening. It wasn't the empty kind anymore. It was steady, a quiet reminder that Celestine and I had survived what was meant to break us. 2 weeks later, life had taken on a new rhythm. The court hearings had begun, and while I didn't sit in every session, the news traveled fast enough. Fraud investigations, bank accounts frozen, a public disgrace splashed across the Albany newspapers. My wife, no, my ex-wife in everything but paperwork, had gone from raising her voice against me to being silenced by her own lies. Her brother was already behind bars, awaiting trial. She was under house arrest, reporters lingering outside her parents' home. I wish I could say I felt triumph, but what I felt was sadness. Sadness that the people I had once trusted more than anyone else had chosen betrayal over love. Sadness that Celestine had to learn so young that blood didn't always mean family. That evening, the two of us sat in the backyard. The air was thick with the scent of cut grass, fireflies drifting lazily in the dim light. Celestine had begged me earlier to bake cookies with her, and now we shared them warm from the oven, the chocolate still melting. She looked happier, though I could still see shadows in her eyes from what she'd endured. She laughed softly when one of the fireflies landed on her hand. "See, Dad? Even they trust me." I smiled, reaching for her hand to steady it. "You've earned that trust, sweetheart. More than most grown-ups I know." We sat quietly for a while, the kind of silence that didn't need filling. My mind wandered, though, to all the moments leading up to this, the way my name had been missing from family conversations, from decisions, from even the simplest of invitations. I had brushed it off for years, convincing myself it didn't matter. But it had. Celestine must have read my thoughts because she stood up, went inside, and came back with the invitation card. She placed it gently in my lap. My name still wasn't there, just hers and her mother's. "They erased you, Dad," she whispered, her voice tight but steady. "But you're the one who saved us." The words hit me harder than I expected. My throat tightened, and I had to blink back the sting in my eyes. I placed the card down on the table, not because I wanted to forget it, but because I wanted to remember that moment when my daughter saw me not as invisible, but as her anchor. I took a deep breath. The wounds may never fully heal, Celestine. Trust, once it's broken, it doesn't come back the same way. She leaned against me, her head on my shoulder. So we build new trust, right? Just you and me. I kissed the top of her head. That's exactly what we'll do. Later that night, as the fireflies blinked in the yard, I thought about the people watching our story unfold. Neighbors, relatives, strangers who had read the headlines. Some probably believed the lies, some finally saw the truth. But for me, it no longer mattered. I found myself speaking into the quiet, almost as if I were reaching out beyond our yard. Sometimes family isn't who shares your blood. It's who stands with you when the world turns against you. What would you have done in my place? I let the question linger, knowing it wasn't for Celestine to answer, but for anyone listening who had ever felt erased in their own home. The night wrapped around us gently. Celestine slipped her hand into mine, her fingers warm and sure. And for the first time in years, I felt something I thought I'd lost forever: peace.